Garrick moved silently through the dense underbrush, his bare feet pressing softly against the earth. His eyes scanned the shadows between the trees, his breathing steady, every sense heightened. He could hear the faint rustle of leaves far ahead, the gentle sway of the wind in the trees, but more importantly, he could feel the life pulsing around him, the subtle rhythm of the world itself. His tribe followed closely behind, trusting in his instincts, as they always had. He signaled them to halt with a raised hand. A deer grazed in a clearing just beyond the bushes. Garrick studied the animal's movements. It was unaware of the danger, blissfully feeding as the moon cast its silvery light across the scene. Garrick nodded to his hunters. In one swift motion, they loosed their spears, bringing down their prey. The hunt was successful. The tribe would eat well tonight. The hunters gathered around Garrick, their faces filled with pride and respect for their leader. He was more than just a hunter to them. He was their guide, their protector. He saw the world differently, felt it differently. There was no one like Garrick. The tribe made their way back to their camp, nestled among the tall trees at the edge of the forest. Life was simple here. Fires crackled, lighting up the night as children played and the elders spoke of the old ways. The tribe had lived in these lands for as long as anyone could remember, moving with the seasons, at peace with the rhythms of nature. Yet tonight, Garrick couldn't shake the uneasy feeling gnawing at the edges of his mind. As the moon rose higher, Garrick sat alone at the edge of the camp, watching the stars. It was then that he saw them, lights, unlike anything he'd seen before. They moved across the sky, not like stars or the moon, but with purpose. His eyes narrowed, his heart quickened. He had no words for what he was seeing. He stood, his muscles tense, scanning the sky. A nearby elder noticed his movements. "The gods," the elder said, nodding toward the lights. "They watch us tonight. A sign of favor, perhaps." But Garrick wasn't so sure. The lights weren't right. He could feel it deep in his bones, the same way he could feel when the seasons shifted or when a storm was coming. He looked away from the elder and back toward the sky, the unease growing in his chest. In the following days, strange things began happening. Animals that had once been calm now acted unpredictably. Birds flew in frantic patterns, predators moved too close to the camp, and even the air itself felt heavy, like before a great storm. Garrick moved through the forests and hills, seeking the source of this disturbance, but he found nothing that he could understand. Just an ominous stillness, as if the land itself held its breath. That night, as Garrick lay in his hut, the wind howling outside, he couldn't sleep. His instincts screamed at him, warning him of something unknown, something coming. He rose and walked through the camp, checking on his people. Everything seemed normal. The fire burned low, the night sounds of the forest filled the air, but Garrick knew better. He knew the land, the skies, the creatures that lived within them. And something was wrong. Something he couldn't yet name. The lights in the sky appeared again that night, brighter than before, moving faster, their patterns more erratic. This time, others saw it too. A murmur spread through the camp, but it wasn't fear. They looked to the heavens with awe, thinking it was a blessing, a sign from the gods. But Garrick stood apart, his gaze hard, his mind racing. In his heart, he knew something was approaching, something beyond his understanding, something that didn't belong to this world. He couldn't explain it, not even to himself, but he knew he had to be ready. A storm was coming, and they would need more than their spears and fire to survive it. He had led his people through many dangers, but this was different. The tribe continued their rituals and their lives, unaware of the growing threat Garrick sensed in every breath. His thoughts turned to defense, to protection, even though the nature of the threat was still a mystery. The air grew thick with tension, and Garrick began to prepare his people in ways they didn't yet understand, urging them to stay close, to be alert, to be ready for something that none of them could see, but he could feel, something unknown, lurking just beyond the edges of their world. And for the first time in his life, Garrick wasn't sure if he was prepared for what was coming. The days following the strange lights in the sky brought more unsettling changes. At first, it was subtle, animals behaving erratically, plants withering without reason. But soon, the tribe began to notice more disturbing signs. Hunters returned with tales of strange metallic objects in the woods, shimmering in the shadows and disappearing as quickly as they appeared. The forest, once familiar and safe, now felt foreign, filled with a silent tension that everyone could sense but no one could name. One morning, a group of hunters set out at dawn, as usual. They never returned. The tribe searched for days, finding no trace of them. No bodies, no tracks, just an empty silence where they should have been. The elders muttered about spirits, but Garrick knew this was no work of the gods. Something else was at play, something far more dangerous. His instincts screamed at him, warning of a force unlike anything they had ever encountered. He couldn't explain it, but he felt the threat growing closer with each passing hour. The sky seemed darker, the air heavier. Strange weather swept through the region, sudden storms, wind that blew against the natural order, and an eerie stillness that followed. The night was no longer a time of rest but one of tension, where every rustle of leaves felt like a warning. Then it happened. The first attack. Garrick was leading a small hunting party, moving cautiously through the forest. The birds had fallen silent, an unnatural quiet settling over the land. Suddenly, a high-pitched sound pierced the air, unlike anything they had ever heard. From above the trees, a shimmering object descended, metallic, hovering, with limbs that glowed in the darkness. It moved unnaturally, with speed and precision. The hunters froze, staring in disbelief at the strange being. Without warning, it struck. Sharp limbs flashed, cutting through the air with terrifying accuracy. The creature, no machine, was unlike anything they had faced before. Garrick reacted on instinct, shouting commands, rallying his hunters to defend themselves. They threw their spears, but the creature evaded them effortlessly, its movements impossibly fast. One hunter fell, a clean slash through his chest. Another cried out as he was thrown aside like a rag doll. Garrick lunged forward, using the terrain to his advantage. He led the remaining hunters into a thick part of the forest where the trees grew close, forcing the creature to slow down. His knowledge of the land, his ability to think beyond the immediate danger, saved them. As the creature slowed, Garrick struck, aiming for the joints where the glowing limbs connected to its body. His stone-tipped spear pierced the metal, and with a sharp, otherworldly screech, the creature collapsed. Panting, Garrick stood over the remains. It was not flesh, not bone. Metal, strange symbols etched into its surface, wires running through its limbs. It was a creature of cold, unfeeling design. His hunters gathered around, staring in awe and fear. "This is no beast of the land," one hunter whispered. Garrick knelt beside the fallen machine, touching its cold surface. His mind raced. This wasn't a predator, nor a spirit sent by the gods. It was something far more dangerous, something from beyond their world. His instincts, honed through years of survival, told him this was only the beginning. He could feel it now, the weight of the unknown pressing down on him. These invaders were not of Earth. The tribe buried their dead that night. Garrick stood apart, staring into the darkness, his thoughts a storm of uncertainty. What were these machines? Why were they here? His connection to the land, to the very pulse of nature, had warned him of a great threat, but this? This was something he had no name for, no understanding of. And yet, deep down, he knew he had to act. His people depended on him, and he would not let this unknown force destroy everything he had fought to protect. That night, Garrick's dreams were filled with fire and shadow. In his vision, he saw a distant mountain, its peak lost in the clouds. Beneath the mountain, something stirred, an ancient force, older than his tribe, older than the world he knew. It was not of flesh or bone, but of stone and metal, a giant resting deep within the earth. Its presence filled Garrick with both awe and fear. The invaders had awakened this guardian, and now it called to him. He could feel its pull, a strange connection binding them. When Garrick awoke, the vision lingered in his mind, vivid and powerful. He knew, somehow, that this entity was their only hope. The machines, the lights in the sky, they were part of something much larger. The invaders were testing the earth, probing its defenses, and the only thing that could stand against them was this ancient guardian. He stood at the edge of the camp, watching the first light of dawn break over the horizon. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him, but there was no time for hesitation. His people were in danger, and the enemy was unlike anything they had ever faced. But Garrick had faced the unknown before, and he had always survived. Now, he had to do more than survive. He had to fight back. The mountain in his vision called to him, and Garrick knew he would have to follow it. The invaders' presence was no longer subtle. Strange machines roamed the forests openly now, their metallic limbs slicing through the undergrowth. The air carried an unnatural hum, a vibration that made the animals scatter and the trees bend as if in fear. Garrick knew the Jarn were no longer testing, they were escalating. Entire tribes vanished without a trace, their camps left in eerie silence. Even the strongest of beasts, those that had roamed the land for generations, seemed disturbed, their movements erratic. The balance of the natural world had been broken. Garrick stood before his tribe, his face grim but determined. The time for defense was over. They could no longer sit and wait for the unknown to strike again. They had to fight, but it had to be on their terms, in the shadows, using the land as their greatest weapon. He knew the machines were fast, strong, and beyond anything they had faced before. But they were also rigid, unnatural. They didn't know the land, didn't feel it like Garrick and his people did. That was their weakness. Under Garrick's command, the tribe moved swiftly and silently through the forest, using the trees and rocks for cover. The Jarn drones hovered above, their glowing eyes scanning for movement, but Garrick had devised a way to outsmart them. He and his hunters used fire, setting small controlled blazes to lure the drones into ambushes. When the machines descended, the hunters struck from the shadows, spears thrown with precision, stone tools aimed at weak points. Traps were laid in the underbrush, hidden pits filled with sharp stakes, snares made from animal sinew, and weighted logs designed to crush the drones under their weight. The first few attacks were small victories, but victories nonetheless. Garrick's people began to believe in him, in his leadership and vision. They adapted quickly, learning to exploit the Jarn's weaknesses. The machines, for all their power, were predictable in their movements, bound by their programming. The tribe's ability to move through the forest with speed and stealth made them dangerous, and Garrick knew this was only the beginning. But the Jarn were relentless. For every drone they destroyed, more appeared. And now, new creatures emerged from the sky, taller, bipedal machines with glowing limbs and weapons that shot fire from their hands. Garrick watched as these new enemies wiped out entire neighboring tribes, their strange weapons leaving nothing but scorched earth in their wake. The war was growing, and Garrick knew they could not stand alone. He gathered his best hunters and set out to meet with the other tribes. Some had already heard of the strange machines, while others dismissed Garrick's warnings, believing them to be tales of angry spirits. But when Garrick showed them the remains of a fallen drone, their doubts turned to fear. The world was changing, and it was no longer a matter of survival against nature. It was a war for their very existence. Slowly, other tribes began to join Garrick, bringing their warriors and their knowledge of the land. United by necessity, they formed a loose coalition. Each tribe brought something different to the fight: knowledge of different terrains, specialized hunting techniques, and unique weapons. Garrick, now a leader of many, taught them how to fight the invaders using the earth itself. They built more traps, ambushed the Jarn's hunting parties, and attacked their machines with fire and stone. The invaders were stronger, faster, and more advanced, but the humans were unpredictable, using hit-and-run tactics that the Jarn struggled to counter. Despite their successes, the war took its toll. Every victory came at a cost: hunters killed, entire families lost to the invaders. The Jarn were tireless, and each attack grew more brutal. Garrick saw the weight of the war in the eyes of his people. They were fighting for their lives, but they were also afraid that no matter how many drones they destroyed, more would come, stronger than before. The land itself seemed to weep, its creatures thrown into chaos by the unnatural presence of the invaders. Each night, after battle, Garrick sat alone by the fire, the weight of leadership heavy on his shoulders. And each night, the visions grew stronger. The distant mountain called to him, its peak lost in mist, and beneath it, the ancient guardian stirred. Garrick saw more now, glimpses of its massive form, a creature of stone and metal, as old as the earth itself. It was waiting, buried deep within the mountain, and Garrick felt its power in his bones. The Jarn's presence had awakened something ancient, something that had been sleeping since long before his people walked the land. But Garrick didn't know how to reach the guardian. The vision showed him the way, but it was still shrouded in mystery. He knew the key to defeating the Jarn lay with the guardian, but time was running out. The invaders were growing stronger, and every day brought new machines, new weapons. Garrick's people were holding their own for now, but they couldn't fight forever. The land was changing, and with it, the very balance of life. He stood before the gathered tribes, his voice steady but urgent. "There is something in the mountain," he told them. "Something ancient, something powerful. We must find it, or all will be lost." Some looked at him with doubt, others with fear, but most with trust. Garrick had led them this far, through battles and loss, and now they believed in him. They knew that if anyone could find a way to defeat the invaders, it was Garrick. The tribes continued their guerrilla warfare, striking the Jarn with fire and stone, using the land as their weapon. But Garrick's thoughts were consumed by the vision, by the distant mountain and the guardian that waited within. The war was far from over, and Garrick knew that the fate of the earth rested not just in their fight, but in something far older, something hidden in the heart of the world itself. Garrick stood at the edge of his camp, the mountain from his visions looming in the distance, its peak hidden behind a veil of mist. It had haunted his dreams for weeks now, calling him with an urgency he could no longer ignore. He knew the journey would be perilous, but the stakes were too high to turn back. If the visions were true, this was their only chance, the only hope of stopping the invaders from consuming everything they held dear. He gathered a small group of his best warriors, men and women who had fought alongside him, who trusted his leadership without question. They would follow him into the unknown. The trek was grueling from the start. The dense forests that once felt like home had changed, distorted by the alien presence. Trees twisted unnaturally, and the land beneath their feet felt fragile, as if it had been weakened by the strange forces affecting the earth. They moved cautiously, wary of Jarn drones patrolling the skies. Every step brought them closer to danger, but Garrick pressed on, driven by the pull of the mountain and the vision of the ancient guardian buried within. Days passed. They crossed rivers swollen with rain, trekked through forests where no birds sang, and climbed treacherous cliffs that tested their endurance. The further they traveled, the more Garrick began to feel the weight of doubt creeping in. The visions had been vivid, but were they real? Could he, a simple hunter, truly awaken something as powerful as the entity he had seen in his dreams? What if the mountain held nothing but stone and dust? What if they were all walking toward their deaths? His doubts gnawed at him, especially in the quiet moments when the forest seemed to whisper against him. He had always relied on his instincts, on his connection to the earth, but this was different. This was a fight against something so far beyond his understanding that it made him feel small, powerless. The aliens had technology that defied everything he knew. They could crush entire tribes with the flick of a hand. How could stone and bones stand against that? His people were counting on him, but what if he failed them? One night, as they camped beneath the shadow of the mountain, Garrick found himself alone, staring into the fire. His warriors slept nearby, their trust in him unshaken. But Garrick couldn't sleep. The mountain loomed above, and he felt its pull stronger than ever. The air was heavy, thick with anticipation. His mind wandered back to his family, his people, and the weight of leadership that had been thrust upon him. He was just a man. How could he possibly be the one to awaken a force capable of defending the earth? His thoughts were interrupted by a deep rumble, not from the earth but from within himself. It was a reminder. He was connected to something larger, something ancient. The visions had come to him for a reason, and no matter his doubts, he had to see this through. There was no turning back now. At dawn, they reached the base of the mountain. It was even more imposing up close, its jagged cliffs rising like the teeth of some great beast. As they began their ascent, strange markings appeared along the rock, carvings too ancient to be human. Garrick felt a deep recognition in his bones, as if these symbols had been left here long ago, waiting for him. The path led them to a hidden cave, its entrance obscured by a waterfall. Inside, the air was cool, and the walls were etched with more symbols, stories of an ancient power that had once roamed the earth, protecting it from threats beyond the stars. As they ventured deeper into the cave, Garrick's heart pounded with both anticipation and fear. His warriors looked to him for guidance, but even he didn't know what lay ahead. At the cave's end, they found a massive stone chamber, lit by a strange glow that seemed to come from the rock itself. In the center was a large altar, covered in dust and moss, with intricate carvings spiraling up its sides. This was it. The resting place of the guardian. Garrick knelt before the altar, tracing his fingers over the carvings. The stories passed down through generations of shamans had been fragmented, lost to time, but Garrick could feel the meaning behind them. This was a place of power, a connection to the very soul of the earth. The ritual was simple, but it required sacrifice. Not of blood or life, but of spirit, an offering of oneself to the earth. Garrick understood now that the guardian would only awaken if he proved his worth, if he showed the earth that he was willing to give part of himself to protect it. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. With his eyes closed, he placed his hands on the altar and began the ritual. He whispered the ancient words, words he didn't fully understand but felt in his soul. As he spoke, he felt a surge of energy, a force that connected him to the land, to the sky, to everything around him. The earth was listening. He offered his connection to nature, his very essence, as a bond with the guardian. The ground trembled. The air grew thick with power. His warriors stepped back, eyes wide with awe as the mountain itself seemed to stir. From deep within the stone, a low, resonating hum filled the air, growing louder with each passing second. The altar began to glow, and the carvings around the chamber lit up, tracing the walls in brilliant patterns. Garrick could feel the guardian awakening, its immense presence filling the chamber. With a deafening roar, the mountain shook. Rocks fell from above as the very earth split open, revealing the colossal form of the guardian. It was as Garrick had seen in his visions, massive, made of stone and metal, its body intertwined with the roots of the earth itself. Its eyes glowed with a fierce, ancient light, and as it rose, the ground beneath their feet quaked. The guardian had awoken. It stood before Garrick, towering over him, its presence both awe-inspiring and terrifying. But there was no fear in Garrick now. The guardian looked down at him, recognizing the bond that had been forged, understanding the sacrifice Garrick had made. It knew why it had been called, and it was ready to fulfill its purpose. Garrick's heart swelled with hope. This was the power that would save them. The earth itself had answered his call. The war was far from over, but now, they had a fighting chance. The ground rumbled as the massive guardian stirred, towering over Garrick and his warriors. Its immense frame, a blend of stone and metal, radiated an ancient power that made the earth tremble beneath their feet. Garrick, now fully connected to this colossal entity, felt its energy coursing through him, a bond forged in sacrifice and purpose. The Jarn invaders had underestimated them. They had not anticipated Earth's ancient defense, nor the resilience of its people. As the Guardian rose to its full height, the skies darkened with the approach of the Jarn's final assault. Massive warships descended from the clouds, their sleek, metallic bodies casting long shadows over the land. The invaders had realized too late that Earth was not the easy conquest they had expected, and now they were bringing their most powerful forces to crush any resistance once and for all. Garrick, standing before the Guardian, felt the weight of the moment. This was it, the final battle. He glanced at his warriors, a mixture of men and women from different tribes, united now under one cause. They were armed with only stone weapons, fire, and their knowledge of the land, but their hearts were steeled with determination. They had adapted, learned, and survived against overwhelming odds. Today, they would fight not just for their survival, but for the future of all humanity. The Jarn forces landed, and from their warships, soldiers and drones poured out, their metallic limbs clanking as they advanced toward the humans. The air was thick with tension as the first wave of alien machines surged forward. But Garrick and his people did not wait to be overwhelmed. With a mighty roar, Garrick raised his spear high, signaling the attack. His warriors responded with equal ferocity, launching themselves at the advancing enemy. The Guardian took its first massive steps, shaking the ground with each stride. Its movements were slow but deliberate, and with a swing of its arm, it crushed the first wave of alien drones, scattering them like insects. The Jarn responded by firing beams of energy from their warships, but the Guardian was ready. It absorbed the attacks, the energy feeding into its stone and metal frame, making it even more powerful. Garrick led the human forces in a series of hit-and-run attacks, using the land to their advantage. They lured the Jarn into traps, pits filled with sharpened stakes, rock slides triggered by well-placed torches, and fires that spread quickly through the dry underbrush. The humans may have been primitive by Jarn standards, but they knew their land, and they used every advantage they had. The Jarn soldiers, unable to adapt to the chaotic terrain, struggled to keep up. As the battle raged, Garrick felt the connection between him and the Guardian deepen. He could sense its movements, understand its intentions. They fought as one, the Guardian crushing alien warships with its massive fists, sending drones flying with each strike. The skies were filled with the smoke and fire of battle, but the humans did not falter. The spirit of Earth flowed through them, and they fought with a ferocity the Jarn had not anticipated. The Jarn warships circled overhead, firing their weapons in a desperate attempt to bring down the Guardian. But each time they attacked, the Guardian fought back with renewed strength. It was not just a machine of war, it was an embodiment of the planet itself, a force that had been dormant for millennia but was now fully awakened. The battle seemed to last for an eternity, the noise of clashing metal and the screams of the wounded filling the air. But gradually, the tide began to turn. The Jarn forces, so confident in their technology, started to falter. Their drones were shattered, their soldiers outmaneuvered, and their warships crippled by the Guardian's relentless assault. As the final Jarn warship crumbled to the ground, the alien invaders realized that they had lost. Their leader, watching from above, made the decision to retreat. The Jarn, who had come to Earth expecting an easy victory, now fled back into the depths of space. But before they left, a chilling message echoed across the battlefield, spoken in a language that Garrick couldn't understand but felt in his bones. The Jarn promised to return, and next time, they would come with greater force. The battle was over, and Earth had won. The Guardian, its purpose fulfilled, returned to the mountain from which it had come, its massive body sinking back into the ground, the earth closing over it as if it had never been disturbed. It would rest once more, waiting for the time it would be needed again. Garrick stood among the remnants of the battlefield, his body aching from the fight but his spirit unbroken. Around him, the warriors cheered, celebrating their victory. The alien threat had been pushed back, but Garrick knew that this was not the end. The Jarn would return one day, and other enemies might come as well. The universe was vast, and they had only glimpsed a fraction of its dangers. But for now, Earth was safe. Garrick had united the tribes, and together they had fought off an enemy that should have been unstoppable. Humanity had proven that it was more than just a primitive species. They had strength, resilience, and the ability to adapt, qualities that no alien technology could ever fully understand. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the land, Garrick looked out over the horizon. The world had changed, and so had he. The Guardian had returned to its slumber, but the bond between Garrick and the Earth would remain. He had become more than just a leader, he was now a symbol, a protector of his people and of the planet itself. Garrick knew that the future would be filled with challenges. New enemies would come, and humanity would have to evolve, to grow stronger, to face whatever threats awaited them. But he was not afraid. The Earth had its Guardian, and Garrick would be ready. In the distance, his people began to gather, their eyes filled with hope and reverence. Garrick, the first Guardian of Earth, would lead them into a new era, one where they were no longer isolated tribes, but a united force prepared to face the vastness of the universe.